Hello everyone. Today I will continue sharing with you the love story of Sam and the police officer Lee. I hope you enjoy the video. After the candlelit proposal, while the emotions were still alive in every breath, the lives of police officer Lee and Sam entered a completely new chapter. Lee didn't let things pass by as a momentary romance. The very next morning, while Sam was still drifting in happiness, he had already begun thinking about a very concrete future. A home, a family, and a wedding that truly mattered. The first thing Lee did was take Sam to meet his family. The trip took place on a peaceful weekend. The road back to Lee's hometown wasn't long, but it was enough to make Sam feel nervous. She gently held his hand the whole way, her heart filled with both anxiety and anticipation. Lee noticed and smiled reassuringly. "I'm here." Lee's family welcomed Sam with rare simplicity and warmth. No extravagance, no distant formalities, just a family meal shared together. Laughter mixed with sincere questions. Lee's mother looked at Sam with kind eyes, and the relatives quickly treated her like one of their own. In that moment, Sam suddenly realized she was not only loved by Lee, but also accepted by an entire family. After the introduction, Lee and Sam sat down together to plan their wedding. Unlike the grand weddings people often see, Lee had a very clear wish. He spoke to Sam with a steady voice, full of love. "I don't need a big wedding. I just want the people who truly matter to sit together and witness us starting a family." Sam listened quietly, then gently nodded. That was exactly what she had long hoped for. A wedding without show, without pressure, only sincerity and peace. Together they chose a small, cozy venue. They discussed every detail, from a guest list limited to family and a few close friends, to a simple reception where everyone could sit close, talk, and laugh like a real family gathering. Every time they planned, Lee was extremely careful. He didn't want Sam to worry or feel pressured. To him, a wedding wasn't about appearances. It was a lifelong promise, witnessed by the people who loved them most. In the evenings after work, they often sat side by side, reviewing the plans and talking about the future. The calm atmosphere was so soothing that Sam sometimes forgot her old wounds. She realized that beside Lee, happiness wasn't loud, but it was steady enough to make her feel safe. And in that quiet preparation, their wedding slowly took shape. Not the most dazzling day in the eyes of the world, but the most complete day in both their hearts. The wedding photoshoot took place on a softly sunlit morning. Police officer Lee took Sam to the studio early. On the way, they spoke less than usual, not out of distance but because of a new, pure sense of shyness. It was the awkwardness of two people about to officially step into the role of husband and wife, with love already full, yet the early bashfulness still intact. When they entered the studio, Sam hesitated slightly. The soft lights, the simple backdrop, everything was gentle, just as they had hoped. She stood close to Lee, unconsciously tugging at his sleeve. Lee leaned down and asked softly, "Are you okay?" Sam nodded and smiled, her eyes unexpectedly peaceful. When it was time to change into the wedding dress, Lee was asked to wait outside. He took a few steps, then stopped, turning his back to the fitting room, though his heart couldn't settle. Images of Sam over the years filled his mind, simple, strong, sometimes quiet, and he wondered what she would look like in a wedding dress. The fitting room door opened. Sam stepped out in a pure white wedding gown, its silhouette flowing gently, not overly elaborate, yet radiant enough to make the room seem to slow down. The lights reflected on her face, highlighting a softness that had always been there, now more radiant than ever. Police officer Lee froze. For a few seconds he said nothing, just stood there staring, his expression so stunned that even he didn't realize it. In that moment, words felt unnecessary. The woman before him wasn't just a bride. She was the one he had chosen to walk beside for the rest of his life. Seeing his silence, Sam lowered her head slightly and asked softly, "Do I look okay?" Lee stepped forward slowly but firmly. Standing in front of her, his voice dropped. "You're beautiful. I never thought I would." He paused, then smiled warmly. "Be this lucky." Throughout the shoot, they were still a little awkward. Sometimes they didn't know where to place their hands. Sometimes their eyes met, then quickly looked away. But with just a glance or a gentle smile, they understood each other completely. No acting, no forcing. Every moment was as natural as their own story. The camera captured not only images of an engaged couple, but the understanding nurtured over time. Gentle handholds, trusting looks, and the sense of peace that comes only from being together. The shoot ended, but the emotions remained. For Lee and Sam, these weren't just wedding photos. They were a quiet confirmation that they were ready to walk through life together. After the photo shoot, the feelings were still fresh, but life shifted into a very real phase, preparing for the wedding. That afternoon, Lee took Sam to choose rings. The jewelry shop was small, softly lit with warm yellow light, and quiet, perfectly their style. Sam stood close to him, carefully looking at each ring laid out on the velvet tray. She didn't search for the most dazzling one, nor care about elaborate designs. She simply turned a plain band in her hand, as if listening to her own feelings. "Is this one okay?" she asked softly. Lee looked at the ring in her hand, then at her familiar face. He smiled and nodded without hesitation. "If you like it, that's enough for me." When they tried the rings on each other's fingers, both felt shy. As the ring fit perfectly, Sam suddenly felt her heart tighten. A strange, very real feeling. Not loud, not dramatic, but clear enough for her to understand. From this moment on, they belonged to each other in a different way. A few days later, it was Lee's turn to try on suits. Sam waited in a chair facing the large mirror. When Lee stepped out in the first suit, he stood a little stiffly, not yet used to it. As a police officer, he was accustomed to his uniform, neat and serious, but a wedding suit made him nervous in a completely different way. "How do I look?" Lee asked, his voice slightly hesitant. Sam looked at him and slowly stood up. She stepped closer, gently adjusted his lapel, then took a step back. Her gaze lingered on the man before her, both familiar and new. "It suits you," she said softly. "Just don't be so tense." Lee laughed, exhaling in relief. In the mirror, he saw the two of them standing side by side. Not perfect like in wedding photos, but real enough to make him feel at ease. The days that followed passed slowly, filled with anticipation. Together, they wrote down the guest list, limited to both families and a few close friends. Sometimes Lee carefully crossed out a name. Sometimes Sam paused her pen for a long time over another. Not out of hesitation, but because they wanted to keep the wedding true to its original spirit. Warm, intimate, and unpretentious. In the evenings after work, they often sat next to each other in their small room. Lee reviewed the plans. Sam noted down details, from flowers and table settings to seating for the elders. Sometimes, when tired, they simply sat in silence, but that silence was never empty. Sam realized she was no longer as anxious as before. Lee realized that happiness didn't lie in everything being perfect, but in having someone to share even the smallest concerns with. The wedding was drawing very near. No extravagance. No fanfare. Just one day, when two people choose to hold hands before their dearest loved ones and begin a life together. Lee and Sam's wedding day unfolded exactly as they had always dreamed. No extravagance, no noise, just quiet and profound, like their love itself. That morning, the sky was crystal clear. Soft sunlight spilled over the small garden where the ceremony was held, slipping through tender green leaves and settling into gentle golden streaks along the stone path. A light breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers arranged since early dawn. Nothing overpowering, only a faint fragrance, just enough to slow the heart. The wedding space was arranged very simply. A few rows of rustic wooden chairs, each with a small sprig of flowers. There was no high stage, no big screen. Only an open space just wide enough for everyone to sit close, to see one another's faces clearly, to hear every breath and every real emotion. Both families arrived early. No one spoke loudly. Conversation stayed soft, as if everyone was afraid to disturb this rare peace. There were understanding looks exchanged. Everyone knew they were witnessing something sacred. Lee stood at the front. He wore a dark-toned suit, his posture straight, yet his hands gently clasped in front of him. His face looked calm, but his eyes couldn't hide his nerves. As a police officer, he had stood before life-and-death situations, faced danger without flinching. And yet now, simply waiting for one person to appear. His heart was pounding so hard it felt unfamiliar even to him. He didn't look around. He didn't hear the faint whispers. His eyes stayed fixed on the small path at the end of the garden, where the sunlight rested softly. When the music began, slow and tender, the whole space seemed to fall quiet. And then Sam appeared. She stepped out in a pure white wedding dress. The gown wasn't overly elaborate, but every line was soft, embracing the slender figure that had weathered so many storms. A thin veil fluttered with each step, and the sunlight passing through it made her silhouette seem wrapped in a clear, luminous glow. Sam walked slowly, not because she wasn't nervous but because she was savoring every second. Each step was a deep breath, the steadiness of a woman who had endured enough pain to understand that true happiness never needs to rush. When her eyes lifted and met Lee's, time seemed to stop. Lee froze. He forgot how many people were there. He forgot where he was standing. In front of him there was only Sam, the woman he loved, the one who had entered his life quietly, yet with unwavering certainty. His throat tightened. His heart hammered so hard he had to inhale deeply just to stay composed. In that moment, memories rushed back like a slow current. Their first meeting, cautious and guarded. The evenings sitting together in silence that never felt empty. The candlelit proposal, trembling but sincere. And even the wedding photo shoot, when he had stared at her in wordless awe. Now, every one of those moments had led him here. Sam stopped in front of him. She lowered her head slightly and reached her hand out. That hand trembled just a little, but her gaze was steady, the gaze of someone ready to place her full trust in him. Lee gently took her hand. His grip wasn't tight, not showy, just firm enough to carry a quiet promise. From today on they would walk together, whether slow or fast, never letting go. Around them their loved ones smiled softly. Someone raised a hand to wipe away tears. Someone squeezed the hand beside them. No loud congratulations were needed. Their presence alone was proof of this love. The ceremony continued in a peaceful atmosphere, but that moment, the moment Lee watched Sam walk down the aisle, between sunlight and stillness, was etched deeply into both their hearts. Not the most dazzling moment of a wedding, but the fullest moment of a love that chose to stay. The first evening after the wedding arrived very gently. No fireworks. No music. Only a small room bathed in warm yellow light, warm enough to chase away the exhaustion of a long emotional day. Outside the window, a light wind stirred the tree branches, leaving slow-moving shadows on the wall, so peaceful it made time feel slower. Sam stood before the mirror, slowly removing each hairpin. The white wedding dress still held its shape, carrying a faint scent of flowers and sunlight. She lowered her head and took a deep breath, as if she wanted to memorize this feeling completely. The feeling of someone who had just lived through one of the most important days of her life. Lee didn't rush her. He quietly walked over and took the dress from her hands. His movements were so careful they almost felt like a ritual. He hung the dress on a hanger, smoothed every small fold, then stepped back and stared at it for a long time, as if he were preserving something fragile yet precious. "You're taking such good care of it," Sam whispered, her voice as light as the wind. Lee smiled. "Because today, you were at your most beautiful." She didn't answer. She only lowered her head, but the corner of her lips curved into the smallest smile. They didn't talk much after that. Once they changed clothes, they sat by the window. No television. The city outside still glowed with lights, yet the room felt strangely quiet. Sam leaned against Lee's shoulder, feeling his familiar steady breathing. Lee wrapped an arm around her, not tightly, just enough to let her know she was exactly where she belonged. After a long while, Sam spoke. "Do you have to go to work early tomorrow?" Lee shook his head. "I took a day off. I want to stay home." She turned to look at him, her eyes softening. "Just stay home." "Yeah," he replied, steady and sure. "Home. With you." The silence stretched, but it was never empty. They began talking about the smallest things: what to eat for breakfast tomorrow, where the bookshelf should go, whether they should plant a few more pots on the balcony this weekend. No one spoke of grand plans or distant futures. Just simple pieces, enough to build a life together. Then Sam whispered, very softly, "I don't need much. I just need nights like this." Lee lowered his head until his forehead touched hers. "Me too." Outside, the wind kept blowing. Inside, the light stayed warm. No dramatic climax, no loud promises. Only two people sitting side by side, looking toward a tomorrow that felt very near, where happiness wasn't some faraway thing, but simply being together. Long enough, peaceful enough. Their honeymoon began in the simplest way, and that simplicity made it special. They arrived at the seaside town in the late afternoon. The sun was no longer harsh, only spreading a thin layer of gold across the water. A narrow road led into the quiet resort, lined with short palm trees, their leaves rustling in the breeze. Lee drove more slowly than usual, as if he wanted to stretch out the moment between their old life and the brand new days waiting ahead. Their room wasn't big. Light-colored wooden furniture, and a balcony door opening toward the sea. Sam set her bag down and walked straight outside, standing for a long time before the endless horizon. The wind carried a faint salty scent, mixed with the last warmth of sunlight lingering on the wooden railing. She tugged lightly at her sleeve, letting the breeze slip through, then turned to look at Lee, her eyes both shy and safe, as if she were learning to believe these days were real. "Is it really our honeymoon now?" she asked. Lee set the luggage down and stepped behind her. "Yeah, it's ours." His voice was low and steady. No extra words needed. On the first night they didn't go out. They simply opened the balcony door and sat together, listening to the waves. Sam made tea. Lee leaned back in his chair. They talked about small things. Breakfast tomorrow, whether to wake up early or sleep in, how long the seaside walking path was. Sometimes Lee fell silent for a long time, not because he had nothing to say, but because he was savoring a rare kind of peace, something he didn't often have in his daily life. The next morning Lee woke up early. He brewed coffee and opened the door to let the wind flood the room. Sam woke to the warm scent of coffee and pale sunlight, feeling so light she had to lie still for a few seconds to adjust to that slower rhythm. She looked over and saw Lee standing at the balcony, his back turned, his posture relaxed, so different from his usual self. That sight made her smile, a smile that was small and real. They walked along the beach while the sun was still low. The sand was cool, the waves small. Sam lifted the hem of her dress slightly, letting her bare feet sink into the sand. Lee matched her pace, never rushing, never pulling her hand, just being there. She told him about her childhood, about dreams she had once abandoned, about nights when she believed she would never find peace like this. Lee listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes smiling faintly. For him, hearing Sam speak, being beside her as she dared to be honest, was already a gift. At noon they ate at a small seaside restaurant. Wooden tables, a few potted plants, the quiet sound of spoons touching bowls. Sam rested her chin on her hand and looked at Lee, realizing that the man across from her, wearing simple clothes, no uniform, none of the familiar sternness, felt closer than ever. "Does this feel strange to you?" she asked. "Strange how?" "Like we're here, and we don't have to worry about anything." Lee stared at the sea for a moment, then said, "I'm still learning how to get used to that feeling too." In the afternoon, they rented bicycles and rode along the coastal road. The wind grew stronger, and sunlight broke into sparkling shards across the water. Sometimes Sam pedaled fast and laughed out loud, and Lee had to call after her. Sometimes they stopped, sat on stone steps, and watched the waves roll in. They didn't take many photos. They didn't need a camera, because they were recording everything with their senses. At night, they ate a simple dinner near their place. Warm lights, the sound of the sea close by. Sam told Lee what she wanted to do after they returned. A bright corner of the house, a few plants, dinners without rushing. Lee listened, then spoke slowly. "I can't promise everything will always be calm, but I promise we'll go through it together." On the second night, they sat by the window. Outside, the sea was dark, dotted with distant lights. Inside, only a small lamp was on. Sam rested her head on Lee's shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, not tightly, just enough to tell her she was exactly where she belonged. "I never thought I'd have days like this," she whispered. Lee lowered his head, his voice deep and slow. "Me neither. But from now on, I want you to have many more days like this." The days that followed passed in the same way, slow, quiet, and full. Waking up together in the morning, walking, reading, listening to the wind in the afternoon, sitting close at night, talking about ordinary life. No noise, no drama. Yet every moment fell perfectly into place. On the last day, Sam stood on the balcony for a long time. She knew they were about to return to familiar routines, responsibilities, and busy days. But this time she wasn't afraid. She turned to Lee and took his hand. "Let's go home," she said. "We'll take these days with us." Lee nodded. Their honeymoon ended as gently as it began. And in that simplicity, Sam understood clearly. Happiness isn't something that makes your heart race. It's something that makes your soul feel at peace. Beside Lee, she found that peace, deep enough, long enough to call it a lifetime.
Xin chào mọi người. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video hôm nay của mình. Hy vọng mọi người sẽ yêu thích câu chuyện mà mình chia sẻ ngày hôm nay. Và chúc mọi người có một ngày mới vui vẻ, hạnh phúc và một ngày làm việc tràn đầy năng lượng. Kênh của mình thì hiện tại đang kể câu chuyện về Tử Sang và người mẹ đơn thân Diệu Hân. Và thường thường những video sẽ được phát hành vào khung giờ 7 giờ tối và 7 giờ sáng. Nếu mà mọi người yêu thích thì nhớ bấm like, share, bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất. Và ủng hộ kênh cho mình để mình có động lực ra nhiều video hay hơn cho mọi người cùng xem. Và cảm ơn mọi người đã lắng nghe hết một phút chia sẻ của mình. Hy vọng mọi người vẫn sẽ ủng hộ và yêu thích kênh của mình. Cảm ơn mọi người và hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở video tiếp theo nha.